I'm going to give Captain America the Winter Soldier a 9 out of 10.
I'm going to rate this movie an 8 out of 10.
I'm going to rate this movie an 8 out of 10.
Captain America the Winter Soldier is one of the most well-regarded of the Marvel MCU movies. And I think it's because it has a very mature plot and storyline going on, a very strong anti-government theme to it, which is, of course, leading up to Captain America Civil War. And I do think it's a very good movie. The villain is very good. His motives, you understand them. You understand why he wants to do what he's doing. And, yeah, you know he's wrong, but it makes sense, and you kind of feel what Nick Fury says when he says, what does he say? I'm strong for choosing not to.
Yeah.
Or the courage to choose.
I have the courage not to, yeah.
Yeah, the courage to choose not to. Someone in a position of power, and, you feel like you can make a difference by sacrificing, a bunch of people, but you're choosing not to because you know it's wrong. And I really liked that line in particular. But, and Nick Fury, too, as a character he develops, at first he's kind of going along with an extent to this plan of more control and fear, and then he changes his mind. There are a few things I didn't like about it. One of them being Falcon. I mean, he did good in his role, but I didn't... Some of the deeper stuff that they explore with him being a soldier and losing his friend, I thought could have been done a little bit better. The whole part where Captain America meets him at the counseling place, that felt a little cliche. Not that I don't have a problem with him being at the counseling. It's a good idea. I just felt it could have been handled better. It was kind of an opportunity to do a little bit of a darker scene maybe, but it just felt a little cliche. Otherwise, I mean, the characters are pretty good in this. They do give you time. I did really like Black Widow in this movie. I think it's probably her best performance out of Avengers. Yeah, Avengers 1, 2, and Iron Man 2. I think she was just really good. Really charismatic in the role. And I did like Chris Evans, too. There was some weird, color correction stuff going on that I noticed. Maybe it was the TV. I don't think it was. It kind of had this bright, pale look to it at times, and I didn't really like that. Just felt kind of odd. Although I liked that they I liked the main villain in this movie, but I thought the Winter Soldier was a little bit kind of pushed aside to an extent, and like a lot of movies, there's a lot going on, and they have to choose to focus on one thing or another, but it is called the Winter Soldier, and I didn't really feel like there was enough of that in this movie.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Marvel movies. I think I liked it more than you, I guess, overall. It's probably my second or third favorite overall. I think Chris Evans does a really good job, as he does in most of them. But in this one, he has more of a interesting story arc going on. In the first one, he becomes uninteresting after he becomes Captain America. And in the Avengers, he came off a little bit bitter and kind of angry at everyone. It's more interesting in the modern setting of him being the guy who will always do what's right, because everything's so gray now, and never compromising and always just doing what's right, even if there's sacrifice. You always have to do what's right. It's a lot more interesting than it is back in 1944 when it's just a war and everything's clear what's right and what's wrong. The action is really, really good in this. There is a little bit of shaky cam, and you can tell that some of it may have been sped up, but I mean, he is a super soldier, and most of the fighting's between him and the Winter Soldier. They're both super soldiers, so they're going to move faster than a normal human being, so I didn't mind that. The villain is very interesting. He's certainly one of the better Marvel Cinematic Universe villains. That's one of their main problems in a lot of them, that the villains are very dull, and where either they're just not very interesting and they're really powerful, or they're really interesting and they're not very powerful. I think I don't even know his name.
Alexander Pierce.
Yeah, Alexander Pierce is a. I mean, he himself is not physically powerful, but he controls so much that he comes off as more menacing, and he's a very interesting character where you can understand where he came from. And the fact that Nick Fury is one of his best friends, and Nick Fury is on his side, he doesn't know completely what's going on at first, and that they both have a similar mindset. He's just very interesting. Nick Fury is very good in this, All the characters in it, like, they're all interesting, and they have character arcs that they go through, which is something that a lot of Marvel movies don't do with every character, the main character. But this one, all the characters, it helps that pretty much all of them, other than Falcon, have been set up in other movies. So it's more interesting and engaging overall. The main problem this is really my only real problem with the movie. It is kind of a big problem, but because I like everything else so much, it doesn't bother me as much, is that the Winter Soldier does not get as much attention as he should. He's very cool. I like the way he's done. The actor does a good job with what he's given, but he really only becomes a big part of the movie in the last hour or so after Captain America actually finds out who he is. And then they show a little bit more of him getting brain control and Captain America struggling with the fact that he might have to kill him and not wanting to. Once that does come into play, it is very interesting, but it doesn't come into play until after halfway through the movie. I mean, the overall story is interesting, as you said, so it doesn't bother me that much, but it is called The Winter Soldier. That's one of my favorite just comic book stories ever. So it was disappointing to see that he wasn't given as much attention as maybe he should have been. But overall, I did really like it. And one other thing, I kind of get where you're coming from with the Falcon stuff, but overall, I really like Falcon, and I understand why him and Cap are friends, and it works for me.
I just felt they could have maybe made it a little deeper. That's all.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, I guess, but you understand and you get why they're friends.
Yeah, I know, because they're both soldiers, but I just think could have explored it maybe a little bit more in a little bit of a darker way, maybe.
The actors click together too. It's not like in the first one where he just has these soldier guys that he rescues and they're just friends all of a sudden. So, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, but it worked for me overall.
Yeah, I would agree. I like the Falcon. I would kind of agree with both of you, or I think he should really be more developed, but I do think he has good chemistry with them, and there is at least a pretty good basis for their relationship. I'm hoping both that and some of the stuff with Winter Soldier will be explored more in Civil War and will be fleshed out more. And yeah, I really like this movie. I think everyone just does a really good job in it. I think the action is pretty good. I do think that there's a little too much shaky cam in some of the scenes, especially right in the middle, like the whole thing around the bridge where Cap and Winter Soldier fight. And I think some of the action earlier on the Lemurian Star is probably the best action in the movie, where he's fighting Batroc and all that. That stuff is really good. My biggest gripe, honestly, is that in the scene where him and Black Widow are in the old army camp and they discover the Hydra computer thing, is that the bad guy, what's his name?
Alexander Pierce?
No.
The German scientist.
From the first movie, yeah. He kind of just gives off this exposition that's kind of really typical, where he's like, oh, we have this big evil plan. And like I get that he's supposed to be like buying time until the missile drops on him, but it's kind of like, couldn't you buy time without giving all this stuff away? Other than that, though, I do think this movie is really solid and one of the best Marvel movies. The other thing I would say about the action is that when they speed it up, like you can kind of tell it looks kind of artificial looking, which is often a problem when they do that. But
I couldn't really tell, but I guess
at least in certain
it's kind of shaky.
Yeah,
so I couldn't really tell very much, but it was just hard to concentrate on when everything's going that fast. It's kind of like the Man of Steel thing where, I understand why it's supposed to be fast. It just makes it less interesting because you can't really see that well what's going on.
Yes, a little slow motion would have been appreciated, I suppose.
Yeah, or just, I guess, more, not as many close-ups, wider shots. I don't know. I just tend to be not a huge fan of that.
And that's why I like the opening sequence, because there is a lot more wide shots and you can always really tell what's going on.
Yeah, it did give me hope in the regard that the one scene with Nick Fury, he's talking to Captain America in the elevator about his dad. It felt very genuine, something you don't really see that much in a lot of Marvel movies, almost something out of a Tarantino movie or something, which is kind of interesting.
Because it's Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And there's a reference to Pulp Fiction at the end.
But yeah, I think this director, or these two directors, I should say, are very promising in regards to Marvel. So was Josh Whedon.
Yeah, and Shane Black.
Yeah, I don't know if he's returning for anything.
No,
and a lot of people don't like him for
Iron Man 3.
Yeah, and Josh Whedon kind of was a little bit of a letdown with Avengers 2, but
that was partly a studio issue.
Yeah, we'll see where it all goes.
Go ahead. Make my day.
All right, my favorite quote, or really exchange from this movie, is where Nick Fury is talking to Cap, and he says, S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is, not as it would like it to be, and it's time for you to get with that program. And then Cap says, don't hold your breath.
My favorite quote from this movie is when Nick Fury says, I have the courage not to.
My favorite quote from this movie is when Captain America says, then finish it, because I'm with you to the end of the line.